I weigh in on Bud Light and the Dylan Mulvaney trans controversy, one underlying issue with the trans argument that nobody seems to be making, and why conservatives shouldn't be too excited just yet about the protests of Anheuser-Busch. I cover all that in this episode of the Mayoral Podcast. Welcome back, everyone. Before I get into everything, make sure that if you like this video and you enjoy the content, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and help me produce more videos and grow the channel. So, recently, Bud Light has decided that they were going to add Dylan Mulvaney, the TikTok star, as one of their spokespeople. Now, typically, these things have not backfired on large corporations in the last few years. Once these corporations decide that they want to go a certain direction politically, there hasn't been much of a backlash. There is, however, a big difference between Bud Light and some of these other corporations when it comes to their clientele. This article from CNN Business, headline, Bud Light's inclusive ad campaigns are good for businesses, experts say. This is from April 13th, 2023. CNN New York. Company X introduces marketing campaign that touches on why, a cultural issue, and some people oppose. Group Z lashes out on social media, rinse, repeat. The phrase get woke and go broke employed by some conservatives on social media suggests that brands which employ inclusive campaigns are angering a significant enough portion of consumers to lead to a material drop in sales. But experts say that inclusive campaigns are in fact often lucrative for businesses, serving as an important tool to reach key demographics. Now, that might be true for some companies, but when it comes to Bud Light and Nike, there is a lot of saturation when it comes to those particular product lines that they provide. Some other companies have seemingly been able to get away with it, something like Disney. Now, Disney is kind of very unique when it comes to the content they produce. There is not only a nostalgia piece for a lot of people that would otherwise take their business elsewhere, but their content is geared towards children, and a lot of children ultimately are going to sway their parents to take them to a movie or pay for Disney Plus or go to Disneyland or Disney World, whatever it might be. Bud Light does not have that luxury. There are a ton of different beer brands out there when it comes to Bud Light, Coors Light, Miller Lite, all these other light beers. There isn't too much of a differentiation. It comes down to either brand loyalty or taste. And for, I think, a lot of people out there, when it comes to taste, there isn't too much of a difference between Bud Light and the other competitors. Bud Light has opened itself up to some type of protest that could actually end up being pretty material. When you go to the liquor store, it's pretty easy to just not grab an Anheuser-Busch product. It's a lot more difficult to protest a company like Disney that has such unique content. They own Star Wars, they own Harry Potter, they own all the Disney characters, all those franchises, the Marvel movies. They have a stranglehold on a lot of content where Bud Light, a consumer can easily just grab the other beer in the fridge. Nike faces a similar, but not quite as daunting task when it comes to their product. Now, there is a differentiation. Some people like the fashion a little bit better of Nike. You can't get Air Jordans if you were to buy Adidas or Reebok. But when it comes to like general apparel, when it comes to general kind of running shoes, things of that nature, they can see a backlash for using somebody as their spokesperson like Dylan Mulvaney. Now, for conservatives out there, I think protesting these brands is something that can be done very easily. Like I said, when you go into the liquor store, all you have to do is just buy a different brand other than an Anheuser-Busch product. When you go into the athletic apparel store, all you have to do is buy something other than a Nike, and they will feel the backlash from that. Again, it's not going to be something that can be done for every single corporation out there, seeing as most of those corporations that are out there now have gone pretty hard to the left. Some of them have a pretty firm monopoly when it comes to their business. Google's going to be hard to get away from completely. Amazon's going to be hard to get away from completely. Disney's another one that, as I mentioned before, there's a lot of them that don't have major competition in their market segment. However, Bud Light is one of them. Nike is one of them. So I would encourage anyone who's upset about Dylan Mulvaney, the trans TikToker, being a spokesperson for Bud Light to simply drink another beer. You don't have to get violent. You don't have to be offensive to anybody. All you need to do is simply not buy the beer. It's the easiest thing in the world to do when it comes to a protest. Now, it's going to take some time and it's going to take commitment, but I don't see any reason why people that want to make Bud Light and Anheuser-Busch feel the pain of them not aligning with their values and protesting their beer, I don't see any reason why they can't do that for a prolonged period of time. Again, some of these other companies, it's going to be harder to stay away from. A beer company is not one of them. An athletic apparel company like Nike is another one that's not one of those companies that's going to be hard to stay away from. Now, it used to be, when it came to these marketing campaigns for these large corporations, they wanted to pick something that was going to be not offensive to anybody and include as many people as possible. When you pick somebody like Dylan Mulvaney, a trans activist, you're isolating a very small market segment. So they claim that they want to have more inclusivity when it comes to their product line, but they're alienating a lot of their core consumers. There's a lot of people out there that don't want to support a brand that promotes something that they know that is just not true, like a boy can become a girl and a girl can become a boy. So Anheuser-Busch will feel some of this pain, certainly with some of their consumers. Nike might feel it as well, but probably not as much. Their core consumer might be a little bit more left-wing, whereas the Bud Light typical consumer is a little bit more right-wing. But either way, both of those companies have markets that are very saturated when it comes to the products they produce. Now, one thing specifically with this controversy that nobody seems to be talking about, I've heard other people talk about it when it comes to other topics with trans, but when it comes specifically to Dylan Mulvaney, is the fact that he's claiming that he's been a woman for only a year, where there are other instances where the trans activists say that that person who is a male was always a female. Taking a look here just at the Google images when it comes to the Dylan Mulvaney commemorative 365 days of celebrating being a woman can, you can see clearly on there that Bud Light is recognizing that Dylan Mulvaney has only been a woman for 365 days. Prior to that, he was a man. I think he was non-binary for a little bit, whatever that means. They're claiming here that he's only been a woman for 365 days. Now, compare that to this Time magazine article from about 2 years ago about Elliot Page. It says, Elliot Page is ready for this moment. But he does remember the acute feeling of triumph when, around the age of 9, he was finally allowed to cut his hair short. I felt like a boy, said Page. I wanted to be a boy. I asked my mom if I could be someday. Growing up in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Page visualized himself as a boy in imaginary games, free from discomfort of how other people saw him as a girl. After the haircut, strangers finally started perceiving him the way he saw himself, and it felt both right and exciting. Now, the article continues on, talking more about Ellen Page transitioning to Elliot Page. You can see here the Time magazine cover from April 5th of 2021 with now Elliot Page and a quote saying, I'm fully who I am. And you can see that, Ellen Page looks more like a male now after having transition surgeries and presumably some type of hormone replacement therapy as well. Now, the article goes on talking a little bit more about Ellen Page's career and how she kind of overcame some things about being a trans person. And in the article, they never refer to Elliot Page as Ellen Page. It says that he experienced that or he experienced this. Now, the article continues. That role in Pit Pony led to other productions, and eventually, when Page was 16, to a film called Mouth to Mouth, playing a young anarchist. Page had a chance to cut his hair again. This time, he shaved it off completely. The kids at his high school teased him. But in photos he has posted from that time on social media, he looks at ease. Page's head was still shaved when he mailed in the audition tape for the 2005 thriller Hard Candy. People in charge of the casting asked him to audition again in a wig. Soon, the hair was back. And the article continues on like that. Elliot Page was never Ellen Page, was always a he, never a she. Page's tour de force performance in Hard Candy led 2 years later to Juno, a low-budget indie film that bought Page an Oscar, BAFTA, and Golden Globe nomination, and suddenly mega fame. The actor, then 21, notice not actress, struggled with the stress of the ascension. The endless primping, red carpets, and magazine spreads were all agonizing reminders of the disconnection between how the world saw Page and how he knew himself to be. I just never recognized myself, Page says. For a long time, I could not even look at a photo of myself. It was difficult to watch the movies too, especially ones in which he played more feminine roles. So the article continues on like that, talking about how Page overcame all these issues with him being a trans person and never actually being a female, always being a male all along. But you'll notice that they totally got rid of any type of indication that he was ever a female. Ellen Page just never exists and is completely gone and erased from our memories. Now compare that to this article from Forbes, how trans TikTok star Dylan Mulvaney became a far-right target after scoring deals with Bud Light and Nike. It kind of gives, if you look here, if you're watching the video or not listening on audio, it gives a timeline of kind of what happened from April 1st all the way through April 14th. You can read that yourself. But really what I want to call out here is the background that they mention here in this article. Since racking up millions of followers, Mulvaney has partnered with a number of brands and made high-profile media appearances. In October, on day 222 of being a girl, Mulvaney visited the White House and spoke with President Joe Biden about transgender rights in his interview for This Now. Biden, during this conversation, said laws targeting transgender individuals and gender-affirming care are immoral. Last month, on day 352 of being a girl, she accepted the Queer Ties groundbreaking award given by Queerty, an online LGBTQ magazine. In her speech, Mulvaney considered her, quote, trans joy in light of a barrage of anti-transgender legislation and protests to be groundbreaking. Now, notice the difference between the way the media paints Dylan Mulvaney and the way that they paint Elliot Page, formerly Ellen Page. Elliot Page has always been a man, has never been a woman, even though you can go back and watch all the movies and all the TV appearances, everything like that when it comes to Ellen Page, and see that that person actually existed. Now, Dylan Mulvaney, on the other hand, is counting the days in which he decided that he was a woman. The obvious difference here is that they're claiming, one, Ellen Page was never a female and was always a male, and therefore we must admit that she was always a male and just completely ignore that she ever existed. The other, however, Dylan Mulvaney, at a certain point in time, he was a male, then transitioned into becoming a female. So he wasn't always female. The rules are, when it comes to transgenderism, is that there are no rules. It's whatever anybody says. It's like when you're a kid and somebody calls something. You can never question it because the rules are that they called it, so therefore they get the front seat or they get the last bar of ice cream, whatever it might be. If somebody calls it, and it doesn't even matter when they call it when it comes to transgenderism, they are automatically that sex from whatever point they decided that they were that sex. Now, I mentioned at the beginning of the show, when it came to the Bud Light protest, that not to be too excited if you're a conservative. And the reason for that is you might see a lot of articles out there that are illustrating all the backlash and showing a huge drop when it comes to the stock price and the stock valuation of Anheuser-Busch. I'm going to look at some misleading articles right now that are giving some conservatives a little bit more confidence that this protest is having an immediate effect when it comes to their overall valuation as a company and stock price. So what I did here is just typed in Bud Light stock drop, and you could see a lot of the top stories here: New York Post, Daily Mail, Yahoo Finance, and Fox Business. Now, you look at the one from Yahoo Finance. Anheuser-Busch stock loses over $5 billion in market cap following backlash to trans spokesperson. Daily Mail. Bud Light's parent company, Anheuser-Busch InBev, has lost more than $6 billion in market cap in just 6 days after Dylan Mulvaney partnership sparked backlash. Piece from Fox Business. Bud Light backlash could hit beer suppliers. Transgender activists Dylan Mulvaney campaign worries Heartland and Southern distributors. New York Post. Dylan Mulvaney controversy at Anheuser-Busch is giving the company a bitter sip of woke. Now, all these articles would lead you to believe that Bud Light is absolutely plummeting and they are feeling the backlash immediately. Now, I'm not saying that they're not going to feel this backlash when it comes to picking Dylan Mulvaney as their spokesperson or as one of their spokespeople. But what I am saying is that let's settle down for just a minute here. Taking a look at their stock price, they're currently sitting at about $64.50 per share. at the beginning of this controversy, you'll be able to see here that on March 31st, their high was at $67.09. So they only dropped about a total of $2.60 from their high on March 31st. Take a look at the low. So if you're going to give these articles the benefit of the doubt and you go to Wednesday, April 12th, their low was $63.35. The close was $63.38. So they went from a total of $67.10 down to $63.35. So they went from $67.09 as their high on March 31st to $63.35 to their low on April 12th. That's a total of about a 5.5% drop. Take a look at the blue line down at the bottom. Their peak in market capitalization was $132.36 billion during the middle of this controversy, and then it went down to $127.22 billion, and now sits right around that same mark, $127.63 billion. So the point is they haven't dropped that much in market capitalization. If you look at this chart going to the left prior to any of this controversy, you look at where they closed the day on Tuesday, March 28th, and their market cap was $125.5 billion. If you look at their close on that day, Tuesday the 28th, they were at $63.47, and that's right about the lowest that they got during the middle of this controversy, which again was only about 2 weeks later. So for a company like Bud Light to drop to the previous close of 2 weeks prior to a major controversy, the numbers have not really affected them all that much yet. I'm not saying this to be negative about the protest when it comes to Anheuser-Busch. I'm just being realistic. You paint it as it's an apocalyptic move for them, and you look back at some simple numbers when it comes to their previous prices, not even a couple of weeks prior, it becomes very misleading for a lot of people. And I just want to kind of set the expectations. Right now, they are not feeling that much in terms of stock price. Now, that doesn't mean when their quarter closes, they might not see a huge drop and then really tank their stock price. But as of right now, we're really just not seeing it. So don't let the headlines deceive you when it comes to the amount of money that they've dropped during this time frame. The max that they've dropped from the peak to the valley was about 5.5%. That's not really that big of a move for a company like that, and they've even recovered some of that back. It's not a huge drop in the grand scheme of things. That said, if you're offended by Dylan Mulvaney being their spokesperson, stop buying Bud Light. Stop buying Nike. I've stopped buying Nike personally for different reasons a couple of years ago. I still have some Nike apparel. I'm not going to throw away perfectly good shoes, but as soon as they wear down and I have to replace them, I'm not going to be using Nikes ever again, unless something drastically changes at the company. Bud Light, same thing. Hey, you want to use Dylan Mulvaney? That's fine. I don't really drink Bud Light, but I was a big Budweiser fan. I've switched over. It's only cost them one sale so far, but it'll cost them more down the road. And everyone else who feels the same way should do the same thing. There's no need to get violent. There's no need to hurl ridiculous insults at people. If you don't agree with the way that the company is going, you don't agree with their spokespeople, then it's your prerogative, and you don't have to frequent that business. You don't have to spend your money with that business. People are not required to present a reason why they're not going to buy something. If you don't want to buy something, you don't have to buy it. And if your reason is because Bud Light doesn't taste good, then you don't buy Bud Light. If your reason is because you don't like their marketing campaigns, then don't buy it. You don't need a reason not to buy a product. Just don't buy it. If you want to protest this company and you want to protest Nike, just don't buy their products. A couple things to recap really quickly from this episode. One, Bud Light is not like a lot of these other companies. They do not have a huge advantage over their competitors. You can make your voice heard and you can make it felt in their stock price and in their wallets by not buying Anheuser-Busch products. Two, when it comes to transgender rules, there are no rules. Whatever anyone calls is what you have to abide by. It's like if you called shotgun when you were a kid, you got the front seat. You called the last piece of pizza, you got the last piece of pizza. Nobody questioned it because you called it. That's the rules when it comes to transgenderism. Whatever they call, that's the rule.
What are you talking about, dude? I called it.
He called it.
That's the rule.
That's the rule.
So there are no rules of transgenderism. There's really no point in arguing with a lot of these people because they don't have any rules. There's nothing they're basing their argument on other than this person said that they are X or Y. So therefore, we have to believe them. There used to be this ad campaign about 15 years ago on the Science Channel that said, "Science, question everything." If they were to relaunch that ad campaign now, they'd have to say, "Science, question everything except transgenderism." And number 3, when it comes to Bud Light, right now, they're not feeling the pain as much as the right-wing media wants you to believe they are. Now, that doesn't mean that they won't feel it down the road, and that doesn't mean to give up your protest if you feel that they have kind of betrayed your values and you don't want to buy their products anymore. Continue the protest. But as of right now, in terms of stock price and total market capitalization, they are really not feeling the boycott yet. Keep at it and make sure that they feel the pain. That's it for this episode of the Mayoral Podcast. Please make sure that you hit the like button, subscribe, and follow the channel. It'll help me grow and produce more content. Thank you all, and I'll see you in the next video.